Hello everyone, good day to all of you. Welcome to AIBotics Go Digital Series 2022. Today we are running a webinar on the theme of future of skills and competency reimagined. We have now three esteemed speakers, experts I would say, in the area of training and learning. Each of them looks at training from different angles. Someone who looks at training for the elderly and the young, one who looks at the in-between K-12 standard curriculum, and with somebody who looks at corporate training and a bit into the future workforce. So now we are here to look at a panel discussion. Right? Each of them has presented their topics accordingly, and now what we want to do is kind of talk to them again around their thoughts in the area of lifelong learning, or perhaps I should say life-wise learning. Right? We all know that learning is something that doesn't stop. Right? It doesn't stop when you leave school. Wherever you are, you continue to learn. More importantly, we see technology nudging us to learn more. Right? Even a retiree and a grandparent will also need to continue learning because the technology will affect their pace in life, affect the way they live, and more importantly, to connect with the younger ones. Right? So I'm going to talk to each of these panelists and hear their views. Right? We will certainly want to look at how the different aspects of learning and a different way of curating and selecting content will be an important part of the way learning is going to transform. So let me kind of reintroduce each of the panel. Right. First of all, we have Ms. Charlene Lee. Charlene is the MD for Shine Services as well as the President for APARA. We have Mr. Arif Ahmad, the co-founder and MD of Light Over Lead. I'm sorry. And what's more important is some of the background that he has in working organization and how they can actually help us understand the different features. And last but not least, we have Ms. Vanin, who comes from Malaysia and from this organization called the National Robotics Club, and she'll share with us some of the thoughts from her experience in working with the young learners. So I'm going to put across to each of you very quickly a very short one or two liner in response to the theme of this particular panel discussion: life learning and its transformation to life-wise learning. So maybe you can share with us very briefly, what are your thoughts around how learning has transformed from a lifelong learning to a life-wise learning? So I'm going to start with you. Given that we've got three ladies and one man, I'm going to start with the men, right? So Arif, tell us what you think about the theme.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver, and thank you to all of our distinguished experts as well on how important it is to learn. Lifelong learning has been a chapter that was first, I think, introduced quite a few years ago, and something that we are promoting for a while now. But as I've also said during my session, is too much of options creates confusion. And I think that is what's happening with lifelong learning. And that is one of the reasons why we required the new term life-wise learning. How can we be wiser towards what we learn now? From my understanding, very quickly, if I were to say, I think learning needs to support our now, our present, and our moment that we're working here. Because whatever we're doing, we are only doing what we can do at the present. So at the present, whatever I need to do, if learning can help me get there, I think that is what the wiser learning for me would be. And then we can plan for the future and how we can get there. That would be a lifelong planning. But life-wise learning would probably, for me, be how can I amplify my present, amplify my moment. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. So, Ms. Lee, can I go to you to share with us what you think of this topic?
Yes, actually, I do believe and I strongly advocate that lifelong learning should be wise learning as well, and it's very true, and it's very important to be wise of the contents and knowing how to apply it after we learned it. I think that the in our experience, right, the kids learn and they enjoy, um, and they're very curious. And giving them the right content, or at least guiding them to the right content, and letting them learn the right thing is critical here. So in Shine Services, we always believe that learning never stops, and continue and never stop. And there's just so much to learn, and it should not be applied only on kids, but also on elderly as well.
Thank you, and very much well said. Ms. Nadine, I'm come to you. What are your thoughts for the theme of the topic? You're on mute as well.
Yes, sorry. So, in topic of lifelong learning, so change is the biggest constant today. So even market demands change, method of production change, technology changes. So in the global economy, business changes. So the skills acquired to attain these changes will need to be and replaced after a few years. So the people basically, again, as I mentioned, on the as I mentioned, education can be learned in the classroom. It can be learned within a structured system, and also it can go as far as it goes. But education, really, reality is nothing if you cannot put it into practice. So, meaning it starts from the K-12 and then moving forward to the university levels and then work levels and higher up. So it's quite important for us to actually guide through and see the response and the information shared so that the viewpoints can be dissected. So from my point of view, that would be it.
Wow, very interesting. In fact, um, I believe the earlier generations always believed in lifelong employment, right? And
Yes.
that's because once you pick up from the school, the contents, not much will have changed, and you probably stay with that knowledge and continue working on it. In the earlier presentation that was shared, there was a distinction between the science and the technology, right? Science is what the nature is all about, and largely it doesn't change, but unless we discover new principles. Technology, on the other hand, will evolve, will become better as we do more discovery, because technology is applied science, right? Applied knowledge. And in that regard itself, the current generation is going through certainly a whole gimmick of changes, and they will have to continue to learn to understand how technology is going to affect their life. So, with that said, I believe, Mr. Arif, there was some discussion around employability, and that's important. So, we need to teach our younger generation that as they leave school, they probably should also think about continuous learning to ensure that they are able to stay employed. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this employability?
Thank you, Oliver. Employability is a term that as we increasingly, because one of my experience working with HR automation is I get to meet, work, and have friends in the HR space. So HR is the critical factor for recruitment. And in that recruitment factor, what they've noticed is there is a gap on the dynamism that the students are coming up with. Because what is happening, they have learned a few things, a set of knowledge, but that set of knowledge isn't exactly copied into the workforce area. So what that requires for these young talents coming into the workforce is the need to adjust, the need to adapt, and the need to innovate. That is required by the corporations. That is required by the executives, that they are coming in with the mindset that, yes, I can solve a problem. Yes, I can do an analysis. Yes, I can adapt myself into the workplace. Now it's required by the recruiting talents, because otherwise what happens instead is they become an educated labor. And that is exactly a term that was also given to me by a recruiter, is that we do not want an educated labor coming to us, because educated labor basically means that we're just getting them the work done, but they're not solving a problem. And that is the transition towards talent. And that is where employability is key, is how can I learn the skills that are required in the employability sector? For example, how do I communicate? in the manner where I can be made, I can understand, and I can be understood. How can I solve a particular problem by thinking and going beyond of what is given to me? How can I go around the market to research and identify what is working and what is not working? And how can I understand the cause and effect of why something works and why something doesn't? And then ultimately, how can I build a recommendation model so that we can take that first step towards measuring success and measuring impact? So these are all the critical employability skills that are required for the talents to prosper and come up. And career, as Ms. Fatnin mentioned earlier, career is not stagnant. It's continuously dynamic. So we need the ability to adapt not only to a company, but when the company changes, we need to change with the company as well. And of course, to the workforce. So I guess that's where the employability skills come into place rather than just an employment.
Yes, very, very well said, I must say. Um, in fact, it is quite true that over time, as a company adopts new technology into their work environment, this will certainly happen because the workforce will need to relearn what they foresee. And Ms. Aldin, you mentioned a couple of very interesting points. The emergence of AI and automation, and some of the complex tasks that will be automated. So it is hence so important that with technology being put in place, the skills will have to be relearned or upskilled. And in that sense, training the workforce from young, and here we're referring to perhaps the younger learners in school, to understand how they can search for information is key. Can you tell us a bit more about how you're doing this in Malaysia and your experience with working with learners to help them understand, to explore the world and to build upon their potential?
Of course, thank you. So we're doing it actually in quite a few countries now. So what we have combined is HI with AI, and that is something that at least I personally believe will be the future of Industry 4.0. Is how can we have humans do what humans can do better, and AI supplement the human for the extensive and labor-oriented tasks and labor-oriented intelligent tasks. And I think that is where AI will be key. So what we do with AI for now is we've built sort of like a platform, an AI platform. And what that AI platform does for us, it is ability to process natural language. It is ability to process expert data. It is ability to process not only this quantitative structured data, but also qualitative interpretations of those data. And that is where we have developed these 5 levels of analysis that comes into play. With the problem, and what we have to understand at the very first beginning is what is the problem that we are here, that is here currently in the market, and what is the need that arises from that problem. So based on that, what we do with the youths is we teach them two critical factors. One is how do you identify a problem, and how do you identify a need from that problem. That is what the critical thinking that comes behind something. Because just having a problem, there are a lot of problems in the world, but when we don't identify a need, we do not pinpoint to a solution that can potentially be done. Now, with that knowledge in place, with that skill in place, we then help the youths to have the capacity to research information around that need, research information of what can work. And then we put that information into these 5 levels of analysis of what is happening. So what do I need to measure actually to understand that if there is a problem, or how can this be solved? Then for each of these steps, why does that happen? So for example, if I were to look at, let's say in education, we have training need analysis. So for training need analysis, we need to understand what is the, so that can be something that we were to look at. It's how do I make training need effective? Then we could have the communication, the competitive benchmarking. That could be something that I want to measure. Under competitive benchmarking, I see communication. When a person communicates better, that can have a better cause. That is a good effect or a good cause and effect for us to benchmark this person as someone who is exceptional. So what makes him that? Based on the communication, what makes someone a better communicator? What happens when someone becomes a better communicator? That becomes our forecast. What could happen in the future? And then when someone isn't a better communicator or someone is a better communicator, what can I recommend to them to be either better or to grow their career or to go into a career? And then lastly is what do I monitor so that they can continue to not only become a better communicator, but they can be a better supporter to the environment that they're working on, the environment they're communicating on. So that is the 5 levels of analysis we take these youths through so that they become a holistic at a deeper level and also at a broader level. So that's just a high level explanation of what we can do. But of course, when AI kicks in, there's a lot more data interpretation that happens.
Wow, very interesting. I like the perspective of what you're just explaining and tying back to the 5 components that you briefed earlier. Let me now turn to the 2 ladies, right? Perhaps Miss Lee, we could start with you, and then we will hear from Miss Fanin as well. What I want to draw relevance to is your discussion around the 21st century skills that is needed: creativity, collaboration, um, communication, collaboration, and I can't remember the 4th C. But
Critical thinking.
critical thinking, absolutely. So this is key, right? So how do you see, right, the competency evolving in this 4 space? And of course, I want to hear from Ms. Fanin as well, because I think there's a lot that we can learn from the National Robotic Club. So first, Ms. Lee, what are your thoughts?
Um, Yes, actually, if you look at the 4 skills that I have identified, or at least the industry have identified that needed for the 21st century, right? With the 4 Cs: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creative. I think with these 4 skills, we also must recognize that they're actually highly required in today's world. With these 4 skills, the students were actually equipped with this, and it's able to empower them to solve the problem itself. I mean, if you look at the different aspect of the 4 Cs, right? Coming to creative, where we actually look at creativeness in the daily world on how to solve problems in terms of a new way, a new world, a new the new solution. Um, and then, of course, when it comes to creative, then we need to have collaborations, looking at how to work with others, reaching a common goal. Uh, After that, and also communications, understanding, sharing, and of course critical thinking. I think this 4 aspects, if you look at what we have come across, or at least what we have built into the curriculum, we actually are also putting these 4 aspects into what we have. With the current situations, we are we have also identified that students, or at least children nowadays, when they have issue and we are facing with problem, one of the challenges that they are facing is how to resolve an issue, how to resolve a problem, and a lot of us goes to internet to find solutions. But is it the right content? Is it the right solution? Is it logical enough? I think these are some of the aspects that we have to equip the child with. Choosing the right content in the internet is very key. I mean, in terms of wise learning, we talk about wise learning. What is wise learning? Having the right content, having the right curriculum, having the right attitude in learning it, to use it in the right way, and of course, at the end of the day, applicable to the real world out there with the real world issue. I think these are something which we should equip the child with, especially with the 4 Cs.
I
Yeah.
see how you connect, right, what you're saying in the 4 Cs to really problem solving. And I want to draw upon the parallel that Mr. Arif mentioned about the educated labor, right? So it is not just a reproduction of what you learn. It is really being able to apply and extending that further. So I'm going to turn to Ms. Fanin now to hear from you, your perspective on what has been discussed so far, and what would your thoughts be around the experience you have in Malaysia.
Okay, when we're talking on the focuses on the four C's, which is on the 21st century learning, the communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. So again, we are preparing students for the future. So it goes hand in hand with other children that needs to be equipped with skills and also help assess them to succeed. So in Malaysia, actually right now what we're doing in the National Robotics Clubs, our program actually allows for the students to explore the concepts through one of our classes and also one of our competitions and camps where students are able to work together to come up with solutions and find their to be creative and understand the real work problem, and also on the situation where they're able to communicate and come up with ideas and a solution. So again, with the four C's, basically they can learn more about the key competencies in the critical thinking, problem solving. So they get to engage in the relationship where they can contribute into the educational attainment. So again, it is the well-being outcome on the four C's right now is very important. So we see the outcomes in one of our programs and also classes, and it's very important to start uh, involved in the engineering for the in terms of robotics education for the K-12 students and ongoing.
Well, that's indeed very, very true. In fact, I recall that in last year's AIBotics event, towards the, I believe it was somewhere in the middle of September, APARA signed a MOU with Cebu Technological University. Right? And I believe the university was a lot forward looking in exploring how the students in the university could get international exposure, not just industrial exposure, but international exposure, and the possibility whereby international speakers could be assigned to bring some perspective and awareness to the local students in Cebu. Right? So,
Mm.
Leslie, I know you signed this MOU with the president of CTU last year. Can you tell me more about some of the thoughts and plans in terms of helping the young learners, the youth, get better exposed for international ideas?
Yes, indeed. Actually, it's our honor to sign that MOU with CTU. And actually, if you look at the MOU that we signed is really to emphasize in terms of getting the young learners together to study on applicable solutions that we can actually put it into the real world. So we are also working with industry itself to look at some of the challenges that we have, and we actually will be combining the theory, the practical, and the real world issue coming together to look at how we can actually bring forward the solutions to the industry. So we are actually also trying to expose our students into the real world issue out there. So with CTUs, uh, specialize in terms of what they have in terms of their training curriculum. APARA will in all ways expect to actually assist them to connect with the industry knowledge as well as some of the professional or some of the experts that we have to come together to work further to resolve or at least to help the young learners in terms of the early adoptions to the real world outside. Yeah, so that's what we want to do.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, I understand from the another global organization called Global Robot Cluster. They were exploring how they can adapt from this concept of a world tour companion, right, into a world apprenticeship companion um, for the AI and robotics world. In other words, the intention is to create a program, an initiative whereby we can match somebody from one country can go to another country for exposure and learning, and allow that opportunity for greater exposure and learning. And exactly that what you say, Miss Lee, right? The intention is to connect the industry to the students who are now eager and hungry, right, to understand what
Yes.
the industry is about, what workforce is about.
Yes, as
And we
mentioned, the cross-border internship that we are going.
Yes, yes. Cross-border internship. That's an interesting
Yes.
idea. If only the governments will allow that flexibility, I think it will benefit, will certainly benefit a lot of organization, and it certainly benefit our new generation. Because if I look at the world today, we're getting smaller by the day. Right, there's so much we can learn from each other. Right, and as what Mr. Arif have shared, right, his program span across the different geographies, and he can talk to about experiences that they have in different geography. Somewhere we could pull together what's known as a knowledge common, right? What's common knowledge that we can all share, and then allow the individual countries to leverage on that common knowledge that you picked up from the global community, and adapt it further, build it further for the local needs. Right? That would be a very interesting and a powerful arrangement. Right? So let me now look at how uh, in my view, institutions, uh, here I refer to the education institution as well as the workforce organizations, maybe the HR team, as well as parents, right? The tripartite, right? The education institutions, the workforce organization, as well as the parents. How can they play a role to effectively help the young learners, maybe not just young learners, but the learners throughout the whole education life, appreciate the fact that they have to be wiser in the way they learn, especially with AI and technology being put into our lives nowadays. So, Mr. Arif, can I start with you in terms of views on that?
Thank you. So, if I were to understand the question is for how can AI and how can we leverage the power of AI and technologies and beyond to move further and grow further?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think the ability to leverage AI and technology to augment what we are doing, right? And more importantly, how can institutions, education institutions, the working institution, as well as the home institution, the family institution, right? Parents, that is, help the learner to achieve wiser learning.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one of the important aspects that we've been speaking about now, especially moving to the future of education and workplace, is as a youths or students are the beneficiaries initially. They're the beneficiaries of growth, beneficiaries of what other people are doing, and that there are three important stakeholders who are committed to supporting this student's growth. Now, what is the outcome of this student? The outcome is we want to be, especially as I have been part and parcel of that of 10 years ago now, we want to be global citizens. And a global citizenship requires a global passport. And that passport is not just how can we move between nations, but how can we work between nations and perhaps even out of the world, perhaps even in space. That is no longer a imagination. That is a possibility for a generation that is happening now or even beyond. So that's the 5E that I spoke about, from the exploration of youth, the education of youth, the employability skill development, the employability development, the entrepreneurship, and also the empowerment, develops a career passport. And I think that career passport can potentially be amplified and analyzed further with the power of analytics that AI brings in. That's step one. I think what the beneficiaries can get. The second one would be every educator becomes an educator because they have a passion to support these global citizens. And that passion requires these educators to perhaps be more efficient, not effective. They are already effective. They're doing so much in the work, but how can they be efficient in the way they support? Because they have not one student, they have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands students coming into their lifestyle. So for that efficiency to come up, and we've been sharing this, how is AI supporting the media and communication or media and news? There are a billion news that happens in the world in a day or in an hour. How do we know that what to pick and what to leave out? And we use the word keywords. AI, when we decide, okay, if I want to look at this news, I want 5 keywords, analyze 5 keywords for me. And then AI, what it does, it crunches, it goes throughout the internet to find all the news from that 5 keywords. So what is that keyword? I think that's what the educators need support in. Educators can develop that keywords and AI can do the heavy lifting from them. So the focus comes from educators on how can I personalize support my students, and AI does that heavy crunching of doing all the backend work for the personalization to come. Now the third, parents. They are the real customers of education. And with parents, they are one of the biggest thing the parents are doing is that they're developing a generation of the future. They're the key customer, they're the key players in this, and they're doing it on the sake of their blood, their sweat, their hard-earned money, their hard-earned dreams. They're doing that. Now this is a beneficiary that we need to support, and AI can support them in two areas. From the bottom up, how can we support their children? And from the top down, how can we support them from a professional perspective? From a And this is the middle ground that I believe parents can get support. And of course, the crunching of AI can, the interpretations, and one sentence that we use where AI comes in is the quantitative analysis of a qualitative data, because qualitative data is very
Mm.
subjective, it's very bias driven. But the moment it becomes a quantitative analytics, then we can read, we can do something about it. It becomes a structured interpretation. And lastly are the companies, because companies, I was speaking to the ex economic advisor to the Turkish president. He taught me a very interesting thing. He's one of the B20 knowledge partners. His consulting company is one of the Accenture level now. He taught me a very important thing. Arif, remember, a company does two things. A board of a company only wants two things. Can you make them money? And in the process of making them money, can you lose the risk, or can you reduce the risk that comes with the money? If you can do two of these things, a company will pay for you. No matter how much money you want, a company will do it for you. So what we need to do now is for that youth, and as Miss Lee was sharing, as Miss Fatlin was sharing, as you shared, Oliver, as well as Mr. Yuha was sharing earlier, is this youth, can they solve a problem that can make them money and reduce the risk for a company? And I think that is what the four channels come in.
Well said. Well said. You have certainly shared a number of very interesting ideas. Um, so it sounds like while we are starting to prepare for this future workforce, right, we need to start them young, right, and initially start them young as preschool. But I think the more important period is the K-12 period, right? That is when they start to at least mature themselves in terms of understanding and knowledge, right? That's probably about 11, 12 years old to probably the state whereby they go through secondary school into to college, right? And eventually finish off their program. That is a period where we need to mold them a lot more. And Ms. Fanin, if I can come to you now, you talk about preparing our children for a robotic future, right? And you zoom in specifically into robotics. Now, of course, robotics, as we all know it, is a big topic, right? It encompasses many disciplines, right? So, what are your thoughts around initiatives that perhaps governments can take, right, to better prepare our children for their future?
Okay. So again, kids, even kids that are starting in kindergarten or even entering their last year of elementary school. So there are many reasons why governments needs to take part into this robotic, into the education actually. Because since we are moving into the technology world, so we need to start educating and getting the kids to involve into the future. So again, incorporating with the STEM education of the science, technology, mathematics, education. So we need to really get involved and be prepared for what is going to happen. Because again, as Mr. Arif said, they need to enter the company where they can generate income. That can they give the money? So what talents are they actually? What talents and what are they learning in order we are moving towards the future? So again, technology is growing, so the abilities to provide for the students education are limitless. So what governments can do is actually help to apply the education in technologies, artificial AI, 3D designs, and all that incorporates into the robotics, where it can help the students to learn in a new level of curve. Instead of theoretical, they can apply it. And again, it's more of a hands-on and how you practice it. It's not just where you can study and pass the exam. So it will bring many benefits for the opportunities and also the groundbreaking tools for the students to enter the world of workforce. So robots is the new future. We need to actually implement it into our kids, the children's nowadays. So that's
Ve-
my perspective on the
Yeah,
government.
very well said. I think definitely there's a role that the government can play, right? And I know most governments are trying to take a look at the whole education system, right? And to create a degree of flexibility that allows the child to explore their potential and grow, right? So perhaps some form of a supplementary material or content needs to be made available for the young learner to explore their potential. I'm going to turn to Mr. Arif now, and followed by our two ladies. Right? So this could be my last question. I think this is a very good panel discussion. Um, what would be one advice you want to give to the young learners in terms of the future of skills? We've talked about the parents, we talked about the schools, we talked about the governments, right? And we talk about technology. So if now the advice, the message you want to give to the young learner, what would be one thing you say they should do? Right. So, Mr. Arif, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much. It truly has been an amazing panel discussion and, of course, an amazing session. The options today are limitless. And one thing that I've learned in the span of me working for the past 14 years or so is we are increasingly moving to a world of abundance and opportunity. It's no longer limited and finite. So, because of that, young learners must know what they want, must know what careers lie ahead of them, and must plan their life because there's so much to do. And in the process of doing it, they will just lose time. The time always passes by. And the one advice that I give to them is every house, when built, starts with an architecture and starts with a blueprint. Let's do a live blueprint for these young learners. Do a live blueprint of what you want, where you are, what is your readiness level, and how do you want to get there, and what is your dream and your passion. Let's convert it to near term, middle term, and longer term goals. And the moment that comes into place, we can work around it. And there you could have coaches and mentors and guidance and trainers and educators to support you into getting that journey. So my one advice would be develop your life blueprint. There are quite a lot of people who can support you in doing that. And in that process of developing your life blueprint, understand where you are, what is your strength, and where can be your opportunities.
Thank you very much. That's a very good advice. Develop your own life blueprint and work with people who can help you achieve your goals. Wonderful, wonderful. Ms. Lee, I'm going to come to you now. What would be one advice you would give to the young learners?
Thank you. Oh, I like Arif what he say, life blueprint, how to fulfill their dreams. Okay, I think whatever that the young learners learn, it has to be and it must be applicable. Don't learn just because that they want to memorize the need, but learn because you are able to translate where learning can lead to real application out in the real world. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. In fact, learning is not dead, right? And I
Mm.
go back to Mr. Arif's comment, an educated labor, right? Learning needs to allow an individual to explore and apply what he has learned, and that's more powerful. So I translate your advice to learn and apply. Right? Very good, very good. Ms. Fadin, coming to you.
Okay. So again, as a student, it is just the beginning. So it's the ticket to entering the big leagues and also the network of influencers. So when you graduate and when you achieve something, it is when the real classroom is revealed. So it's not the load that weighs you down, it's the way you carry it and how you pave your future, as mentioned by Mr. Arif. So know your career path, know your way, and lead it. So that's from me.
Thank you. So if I were to put the three ideas together, what we're saying is number one, you need to have your own life blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Build that, understand the path you want to go. And as a young learner, probably you can seek help from the parents or the uh, educators, the coaches in school, the teachers, to kind of bring together a thought around what they want to be. Secondly, I hear from Ms. Lee, learn and apply. So just don't learn for the sake of learning, but learn and understand how you can apply those knowledge and work in a world where problem solving is a lot more important and crucial than learning all the concept and getting A grades, but you cannot apply them. So learn and apply is very key. And what I hear from Ms. Panin is the fact that they should continue to embrace the whole learning process, right, in order to achieve what they want to do. And in embracing the process, I guess there are various avenues for them to do that. Uh, Sometimes one of the weakest module or avenue may not be immediately evident that it will be useful, but it is possible that eventually they will become useful in their whole career. Well, this has been a very interesting discussion. Thank you, my panelists. Thank you for your time of sharing your thoughts and perspective on this very interesting topic about how we're transforming lifelong learning to life-wise learning, because we all know that we're going to learn throughout our ages from the day we step into this world to the day we exit from this world. We'll be learning very much. The question is going to be how can we be wise around the learning process. So life blueprint, apply what you learn, embrace learning effectively. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We've come to the end of this webinar. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. So for all delegates, you will be able to access the recorded version, made available immediately on this platform, Amy, or in about a week's time, we will be able to release the edited version on our website, AIBotics.tech. So we'll see you in our next session. This will be on the 17th of March 2022. Now, the 17th of March 2022 is going to be a very exciting and interesting session because we will talk about AI and robotics in the construction sector. Now, as you know, the construction sector is certainly underserved in terms of technology and it's still very much labor intensive. What needs to happen is how can we think about the different areas and help that technology can be leveraged to augment the human capability. We have speakers from Korea, from Israel, and potentially Malaysia to talk about some of the thoughts and ideas that they have. We will also introduce the concept of construction 4.0 and how AI and robotics will be applied into the construction sector. Right. So once again, thank you to all my panelists and speakers. Thank you to the audience for spending time with us. I hope you've learned something from this session. And see you next month at the AI and robotics in construction sector webinar. Bye for now.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Bye bye.
Okay.